Hey everyone, PC Casual Gaming Dad here, and I've got something special going on today. I've been waiting for some time to be able to set aside. I just saw this go live today, and this is a MMORPG Reddit AMA with creative director Steven Sharif from Ashes of Creation. So I'm going to be watching this video and giving my reaction to it. So let's see how it goes. I'm very excited to be able to add some more reactions, some more research to Ashes of Creation. Before I do that, just a friendly reminder that if you want to see me cover this game more, as well as some other gaming news and casual gaming content from the perspective of a casual gamer like myself, then please follow my Twitch, uh, subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Please consider that. Leave a like and comment on what you like, what you see, something you don't like, some feedback. I'm always open and loving to hear that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I will say one more thing that I am going to be also covering a video probably next week that was recommended to me by a viewer on YouTube regarding Asmongold's interview with the creative director last year. And it's an hour and a half video, so I want to set aside at least 2 hours, and I've just been really busy lately with a number of things, so I haven't had the time to do it just yet, but I suspect that next week, once my schedule kind of settles somewhat, really settles the following week, but I should have some time to do that next week. So stay tuned for that. So there's going to be more coming. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Turn that down just a bit. Looking forward to this. So for those of you who don't know, there's an /MMORPG Reddit page, and for a period, it looks like that people were able to leave questions on there, and that Stephen came on the 13th and answered those questions directly. So there we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special live stream with Ashes of Creation. I am joined by my guest, Mr. Proto Bear himself, the head moderator of the MMORPG subreddit. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for hosting us, and thanks for participating in this AMA with us.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I love AMAs. I love discussions about MMOs. I love discussions about Ashes. And when you invited me to
Should be loud enough.
to do this AMA, I was excited. I was excited to see just the questions obviously that come in, and having a chance to chat with you, people outside of the traditional Ashes community, and what questions they might have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was very curious of myself to see what questions the subreddit would come up with.
Yeah.
I see we have quite a nice list of questions.
Yeah, I saw it. It was like, I don't know, but I saw there was like almost 700 comments on the thread over the past few days. You were really close, because I remember we were on Discord and I was like, I bet you after the first day there was like 500. I said, there might be like 1,000 comments. You're like, nah, I think there'll be about 750, and you were definitely much closer.
I think the post itself lands in the top 3 most commented on posts we've had so far, but Reddit doesn't officially let us check that, so I had to manually sort through a bunch of them this week to see where it landed.
Hopefully that wasn't too much work.
It was to satiate my own curiosity, so it was worth it in my opinion.
Very cool. Well, I know we have a limited amount of time. I'm down to jump into it, and just to give a preface, obviously, for those of you who are joining from the Ashes of Creation community, you may see some repeat questions here, and that's okay. We're a guest in the MMORPG subreddit community, so we're going to be asking the most upvoted questions from that thread that was there for the last few days.
Excellent. They're okay with repeats?
So I'm excited, Marnik, if you want to take it away.
Absolutely. The first question actually is not the most upvoted one, but I think was good icebreaker. Hexango asks, how is your day, Steven?
My day is good. I had a hamburger just a few minutes ago. I scarfed it down real quick because Margaret was telling me I needed to get on Zoom, and she said, you better eat that sandwich real fast. But no, actually, I'm doing much better. I don't know, those of you guys who follow maybe on Twitter, on my Twitter, I've kind of showed these ducks, these wild ducks that landed a few months ago in my pool. And I've been like training them to like eat and come to the door and like knock on the window for food and stuff. And they had babies, actually, little ducklings, 11 of them. A couple of days ago, they showed back up into the pool, and I got a little house for them and some like straw and whatever. And 2 days ago, I was super depressed because the babies were missing, and the mother showed up and was like quacking and whatnot. And I thought the babies had all been eaten because there were these 3 falcons that were flying above the house, and they were like dive bombing. And I was like, no, the babies are dying. And in Slack in the company, I was like, guys, I have some bad news. Like, the babies, I think, are all dead. And then yesterday at like 8 o'clock at night, the mother showed up with the babies in the pool. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord. The ducks are fine.
Maybe she was hiding them for a bit.
It was yesterday or the day before because I was super depressed.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Well, good to hear the ducks are fine then.
Yes.
Well, then the official first.
Best dog dad ever.
Who asks, what is your idea for direction you'd like to take combat, and what are some of the big combat changes you want to test and implement in the near future?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, from the onset, my goal with combat was to have a hybrid between tab and action, and obviously that's a difficult thing to acquire because tab and action have very different paces, very different tempos traditionally in the different games. There have been some games.
So I've recently tried out Black Desert Online, and it's a very, very different type of combat. It's very active compared to, something like WoW, which is just tab targeting, right? So they're trying to implement both. That's going to be hard. That's going to be challenging.
Come along and try to kind of merge the two, right, through a hybrid system. But I didn't feel that, those really kind of captured the essence of both. I feel they either leaned towards one or the other and just had the alternate as an option, so to speak. So we're really dialing down, especially during this alpha, on how we can substantially represent both types of modes. So the direction, the changes that we're kind of making right now are really, tab is relatively easy to kind of implement. I think everybody has a traditional expectation of what tab, means, and they understand that. Action as an action combat as an interaction with tab, like I said, there's been a few ways that this has been done previously. What we're trying to do right now is really play with the way that mode, that reticle mode, kind of interacts, the type of control schema that's present, the ease of being able to swap back and forth, incorporating tab as a portion of that action mode as well. These are kind of the things that we're playing with right now in alpha. The testers are kind of seeing each week new systems come online with the action combat camera and the action combat skills. And the idea is that players get to kind of drive what skills they're going to select through their skill tree, whether that be more heavily action oriented or more tab oriented. So there's kind of a combination right now of hit scan and projectile based skills, as well as templated targeting skills that are present in alpha, and we're collecting all that data as players participate in that. We'll be iterating on it. It's a big thing to nail down. Combat is obviously one of the most important aspects of playing an MMORPG because it is the most frequently, hands-on system that players are a part of, really, and it's very tactile. So, you want to make sure that it feels good, and that's something that we are focusing on it 100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, there's so many.
So what I can say is that having recently tried Black Desert Online with its active, and having only really played with tab targeting and MMOs, I can tell you that the active system, for me personally, was a lot more engaging. And it really sucked me in more. And so, I don't know how they're going to nail the balance of both, but it's not that I dislike the tab targeting. It's that the active is, again, I felt like my brain was getting more of this dopamine rush, right? It was more engaging and more fun to do. So even if, for example, when I'm doing, a quest like in WoW, kill 10 of this, right? Kill 10 boars or whatnot. I'm going to kill the 10 if that's all I have to do, if I don't have to collect. And if I have to kill something and collect, then I kill as much as I have to, and then that's normally it. But in Black Desert Online, and I haven't played the game extensively, but I would continue to kill things after I've completed a quest just because the combat was more fun. So I don't know. That's something to think about.
MMOs out there where combat's almost feels like an afterthought, where it's like, oh yeah, like the rest of the game, like the content is fun, but then like the combat itself is kind of lackluster.
For sure.
So it's absolutely like it's great to hear that you guys are taking the combat like first approach to gameplay design.
Yeah, even early on, long before we approached kind of this Alpha 1, we were playing with combat from an action perspective, right, to collect data, and it is a difficult thing to address because you want to have this duality that's present within the game, and I've often said, like, this is something that we have to get right, not just from like an input sensory perspective where like you do the audio good and you do the visual effects good, but like from a character response time, like it needs to be snapping very quickly. And sometimes a lot of Unreal games that you play, people say you kind of feel floaty in that regard. And so we've done a lot of changes with regards to like character movement and animations for those things. We're kind of playing with split body attacks and full root motion type of attacks, because there's a balance between floatiness and like two-weighted, where you're like restricted character movement. And nobody wants to be super restricted in their character movement as you're a part of a large raid or some giant encounter. So there's a lot of things we're playing with.
Yeah, last thing you want is very slow combat when there's like a million things on screen going on. And to that to that same extent, I've definitely heard people say, "Oh, I don't want to play that game because the combat feels too floaty."
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's thank you for that. The second one, it comes from Felkus, who asks, "Will the Bard class be more like the D&D support archetype, or more like the Bard's Tale all-rounded fighter with supportive capabilities?"
That's a good question. So the Bard class is intended not to be a pure support, right? So that means, like, yes, they're going to have rounded kind of skills that you can spec into that are offensive and defensive, sort of that jack of all trades approach. But at the same time, like, one of their primary components is their support abilities. And the way we want to introduce Bard support abilities is to make them very proximity and positional kind of dependent. So one of the ideas we've been playing with, actually, one of our programmers, Alexi, thought of this was, as you lay down a templated skill, that's some type of support skill, whether that augments your party's attacks or defenses or gives them critical bonuses, whatever, that there might be included as part of that some position spots that are indicated as part of the template effects. And if your party or raid move into that type of formation, you get an added benefit or added buff for a period of time that persists. So you can move into that formation and then move out of that formation, and the buff will persist because you hit that formation lock. So that's one of the interesting things we're going to try with the Bard class. But yeah, to answer the question, it's probably going to be more heavily on the support side, with obviously still having rounded fighting capabilities.
Sounds cool.
And other
Sounds fun.
offensive and defensive stuff.
I mean, it sounds like a really good system, and like that's what everything I'm looking forward to, playing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it'll be cool. I mean, a lot of times in other games I've played Bards, it's like, they always kind of come down to this, you're a musical oriented class, right? You have like an instrument, or your skills have this like musical component. But I've always said, like, traditionally bards haven't always been musicians, right? They can be writers, they can be storytellers, they can be different aspects there. So I think the bard is going to have a little bit of a more way traditional look back at what they were originally kind of looked at as in D&D, and that's going to be something that's going to
is actually super hyped about the fact that there actually is going to be a bard class, because many MMOs these days seem to like omit that. So they're gonna be
I
happy with
agree.
that one.
I agree.
The question 3 comes from like Hurt Me. I would rather not, but use names. Do you have any plans to create an OST for certain individual bosses, like Drone Theme?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's an easy one. Yeah, I mean, it depends obviously on the boss. We have a lot of lore behind who some of the primary
That'd be cool.
antagonists in the story are.
Like the dragons, especially. I'd
and
like that.
those are definitely going to have custom soundtracks essentially to identify that boss, right? And that's not just going to be about the boss per se. It's also going to be about the area of the encounter. Where is this boss found? Why is that boss there? And I think that this soundtrack is going to incorporate elements of either intrigue or mystery or horror, that's part of as you're winding through that level to get to that boss. It's building up to a crescendo of the fight, right? That's music is such an important part of setting the scene, the emotional presence of like what you're doing in this immersive world. It elicits some emotional responses, and we have a great composer, Bear McCreary, who has worked on God of War, on Battlestar Galactica, on Outlander, Black Sails. A lot of great franchises, a lot of great IPs, and I think he's going to do an awesome job in capturing the essence of what that emotional response should be from the player.
Yeah. Most people don't understand. Like, I know a lot of people that play muted, but then will go into Final Fantasy where they have like very strong boss music, and suddenly like for boss fight just turn that off instantly. So I think soundtracks are just a really important aspect for a lot of people. Another question from like a combat perspective from Lord Sigmund 450. Can you tell us your plans on how the summoner will interact with the other archetypes? Based on the class names, we can assume some things, but I think we all want to know more.
Yeah, I think the great thing about our class system, right, is that we have these primary roles. Those are the archetypes, right? So you have 8 archetypes that exist, and those roles each have some semblance to the Holy Trinity in the way class structures exist. And when you incorporate the secondary class to the secondary archetype to create the class, so to speak, you're incorporating.
I really love that about this game, by the way.
From an augment perspective on the main active skills of your primary archetype. So when we think about a summoner has a few directions to take. Well, obviously, summoners tend to portray their power through their pets that they summon, right? That's what we all are accustomed to traditionally. So our summoners, they'll be able to summon pets. Those pets will remain permanently within the world until they're killed, right? And they have to resummon them, so to speak. And the role that pet takes is kind of up to the summoner. They can take a more traditional tank role, a more traditional support role, or a more traditional DPS role, and they're going to have control over that when they, determine what skill points they're allocating to certain types of summons and how they're augmenting those summons to. And those augments will change the appearance of those summons. You have Necromancer that might be summoning undead, as opposed to the more traditional archetype pets. So the summoner's really going to have a direction on what role they play in the party. They're going to be very versatile because they get to direct how they summon, that additional pet. So in that regard, it's going to be up to the player. They're going to have the opportunity to be very versatile and play, multiple roles as part of a party.
You mentioned earlier that it's definitely like rooted in the holy trinity of tank, DPS, and healer. I'm just personally wondering, like, why did you go with that specific system?
Holy Trinity?
There's like a lot of conversation all the time happening about like, why this, why not something else, why not try to reinvent the wheel?
For sure. Yeah, I think that, just from a pure game philosophy standpoint, I think that there's things that MMORPG gamers are accustomed to in the traditional wheelhouse of what we come to expect from playing an MMORPG. And some of those, I don't want to use the word like sacred cow, right? Because sometimes designers, they
Why
want to
fix
have
something
those
that isn't
reasons,
broken,
right?
though? Really? I mean,
I think though that when you're creating an MMORPG, there are certain systems that don't need to be reinvented. And I think
I
that the
agree.
Holy Trinity does a very good job of defining specific roles that you can cater your design around, whether it be from an encounter standpoint,
Yeah, you
whether
don't
it
have to
be
be a
from a balance of
healer per
raid versus
se. You
raid or
can just be
party versus party or
support.
1v1s. I
And
think
there's
it
a lot of
presents
different
a
kinds of
good rock
DPS.
paper scissors type of dynamic to where there's never going to be a pure meta of like what the top class is, so to speak. There's always going to be something that counters that class because you're adhering to this rock paper scissors type of dynamic. And the other thing is that we already have some pretty innovative systems, right? The node system is a very innovative system. We did reinvent the traditional wheel of how content is surfaced to the player with nodes, right? And I think that you want to give an anchor that players can look at and say, okay, this is what I know. Like
I think they're
this,
going to
this
have a
is
great
familiar
amount
to
of
me.
customization,
That's
especially with
that's the
the
nice spirit of the
archetypes,
innovative systems
your
as well.
primary and your
Part of
secondary to
it,
create a
obviously, are the class
class per
systems.
se.
I
I
personally,
think that
I
that's a very
love,
solid amount of
I love
customization.
in RPGs that Holy Trinity. So that's why I decided to go with it.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? Like, it's something not only people expect, but also a lot of what people think of as MMOs and the gameplay associated with it just fits very neatly into that package.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking about
I mean,
gameplay,
I've seen. It's funny actually. Just to comment on that even further, there are games that obviously approach the Holy Trinity and throw it out and go with something that's like your class is kind of defined by your weapon or your class is defined by other things. And I think my hat's off to them. I think it's cool to innovate in that area. It's just like I said, we decided not to innovate on the traditional class structure and stick with the Holy Trinity.
I think a lot of people are actually pretty grateful for that because, I mean, there's an entire conversation to be had about like traditional MMOs and what
Yes.
people prefer. But I think the gameplay question leads pretty well into the next one, where Ash11 asks any announcements as to who will replace Jeffrey Bard.
Not yet. We'll probably be making that announcement, I would say, after Alpha 1. So look for that, I would say, probably around August timeframe.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Then that was
Yep.
a pretty short question.
Jeffers.
The next one, and I love this username, Glorious DJ Penguin, asks how extensive will gambling be? Tavern games or gambling halls? And will it be done with gold or an alternative currency specifically for gambling?
That is a good question. So there's a few approaches we want to take with regards to gambling. One, we're thinking about having a secondary currency that's utilized in the tavern games, and that those have the ability to make unique purchases for cosmetics that are offered through the secondary currency market, right? So you can kind of achieve, you know, when you play with other players, your score. Maybe there's like a ladder system with these tavern games, and you get points at the end of each month. That contribute to you getting that currency. Depending on how well you place as part of those tavern games. That's one thought. The other thought is, keep it traditional where you can allow players to, bid with their actual currency in the game, and they can win that way. There's some concerns about that, but I think the idea behind the tavern games is to create another social interface, right? This is where like players who are loving the RP aspect of MMORPGs, they want to walk into a tavern and they want to meet new people and kind of play games. I think that's a cool idea. I loved it when we first thought of it 4 or 5 years ago, and we have some fun ideas and ready to go with what types of games we're going to offer. Having like race specific games that are going to be available, having unique games that can be acquired as well through like adventuring in the world, and then now if a person acquired that game, they can set up the table in the tavern shop and another person can join. Like I think there's a lot of fun stuff to play with that.
I think you hit on something like very specific and interesting, where you said like specific games for specific like places, things you can find out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that variation in the world.
Yes.
That I personally, that's so interesting because that means that one city is definitely like it serves different purposes and different needs.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're gonna yeah, let's meet up in the game. What are we gonna do? For that we need to go to that city or that place. Like
Exactly.
I think that makes the world feel larger than it actually is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Then I personally do wonder, can I bet on fights?
That's a good question. I don't know. We do have a fighting mechanic that's, I mean, obviously we have arenas, but we also have a unique
I gamble on horse racing.
component of the military node types, where their election method
Mount racing.
is through fighting. And that fighting might be between players, but it also might be between champions. The champions that the players acquire and then kit out over the month election period to participate in those fights. We did think about early on having a betting platform for players to predict who the winners of those might be. There's obviously a concern there that it can be gamed, but I don't dislike that idea.
I mean, that's gonna be the case with literally every system you play.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, if there's a system, there's gonna be people that will find a way to abuse it.
Of course. Yeah. Yes.
At least we do go at the next question, question 7. Donaki Fam asks, will there be difficult content that is made for the more hardcore fan base for a challenging experience and perhaps cosmetic rewards?
There should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
There should be. Not for people like me, but there are for people, yeah.
And obviously, those of you who haven't had an opportunity to check out our wiki, there is a great community-ran wiki by Lex, one of our community members, and it has a lot of information on this. But from a difficulty standpoint and with regards to content, right? Obviously there's a scale there where players exist between players who can achieve and want to achieve much more difficult content and see that content.
People like the challenge. It's
being
fine.
able to kind of react to their capabilities, and that's one component of dungeoning, going on raids that we're going to be incorporating as part of some custom AI solutions on how
they're going to have difficulties.
AI will react to
kind of like WoW does, normal, heroic, mythic.
Expected, right? And that might, AI exists within this kind of like behavior tree of available skills and actions that a monster or raid boss or whatever can react with, and some of those behavior trees might activate depending on players' progress through an encounter, and that can represent either maybe
or maybe content that
abilities,
only hardcore gamers will want to access.
It could unlock specific type of like
I don't know about that.
And recovery effects and buffs that the monster might do. It might incorporate additional ads and additional ad classes. There's a lot of different things that we want to incorporate as part of like the reaction of the world to the player and how that player is capable of kind of addressing content that I think is going to be interesting.
I'm really happy to hear this, not just linearly scaling health in
right, because that's boring. I mean,
no,
I personally hate that type of scaling as a player because it just seems so irrelevant.
Yeah, like WoW does a little bit of that, but then it has different mechanics that show up in higher difficulties. So
if it's strategic and tactical, and it's something that's that's part of its.
So like different mechanics, that make it more challenging. But at the same time, people should have a choice about how they want to play through that. So yeah, I don't know if they're going to do it just by simple like right click, you're going to a dungeon, here's these difficulties, and I'm not sure if they're going to do it like that, but I think it should be available for sure.
Behaviors, then that to me as a player makes more sense. Like, okay, I have incorporated an additional threat level to this monster, and it is reaching deep down in its strategic repertoire, so to speak, of actions that it can take, and it's reacting to that. Like, that to me feels better.
Yeah, you absolutely need some form of like scaling because like you want it to be possible at multiple group sizes, but also not trivial at higher ones.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good because nobody likes like a design where it's like, oh, you will take 5 minutes to kill this boss, regardless if you're at like 5 or 200, and you'll all be doing the same things regardless.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool system.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next question might be very emblematic of the subreddit as a whole, but the false adhesiveness 5 asks, do you worry that people will end up feeling disappointed in Ashes due to overhype, or is that just par for the course?
That's a good question. You know, my thoughts.
This is a very legitimate concern. And I did a video on this when it was part of my reaction, my research series. And a man named Josh Hayes on YouTube, told people to stop overhyping the game to levels where people are just there's just no way your expectations are going to be met. So this is a very good question, and I'm glad that somebody is addressing it. It's like the elephant in the room. Like, hey, Steven, what do you think about this? People are overhyping the game. Like, what are we going to do?
On hype.
Can't ignore it.
There's a very fine line between hyping a game and being excited for a game. What I view hyping is where you are setting unrealistic expectations prior to a game's release, like, this is going to be the savior of all MMORPGs, or this is, going to be I'm going to lose years of my life to this thing, or, stuff like that. I think, like, people, first of all, I would never dare to tell a person how they should feel about something. So, like, if that's the way you want to feel, like, by all means, I'm going to try my best. Our team is going to try our best to live up to those expectations. But I think what we do with Ashes is every month we have a live stream. Every month we show progress. Every month we communicate with players on our Discord, on our forums, on Twitter, on every social medium possible. And we try to answer questions, and we try to just keep people a part of that process. And I think that's what excites people who are a part of our community, because I think that type of interaction, you can find it here and there amongst, traditionally indie developers, more so than the AAA companies. And that's not a dig at AAA companies. I'm not trying to dig at them per se. But I think that's what excites people. And we've had our fair share of criticism. I mean, back in 2017, on MMORPG subreddit itself, right? The Sea of Salt has definitely come to our shores many times. so like, that happens, and that's okay. I think it's a counterbalance to people's excitement. Anytime you have excitement go up, you're going to have salt go up as well. And that's just, there's a parity there that has to be, the god of salt must be entertained. I'm
going to use that now.
Yeah. So I think that's okay. I think what we have to really focus on as a community, especially, I guess I would talk to the MMORPG subreddit community specifically, an MMORPG enthusiasts out there, gamers, fellow gamers who love MMOs, is if we want companies and we want individuals to spearhead change in the industry or to innovate in the industry, we must be supportive, vocally supportive of the changes we want to see, right? And as consumers, we really only have one power, and that's the power of the wallet. So I actively tell people, do not support Ashes of Creation with monetary purchases. Do not pre-order the game. We don't need that money to finish Ashes of Creation. If you want to support Ashes, by all means, we have those available, and we love and respect the players that do choose to do that. But if you're skeptical at all, just sit back. But sit back and watch and give feedback and express the things that you agree with from a game design philosophy standpoint, from a monetization standpoint, from a artistic standpoint, from whatever it is that you can talk about that resonates with you as a player. Talk about those things, but don't go out and shit on games because they're trying something new, because at the end of the day, behind the screen are 100 developers at Intrepid Studios. These are real people, human beings that are spending a lot of time, night and day, working on a project because they want to create something that makes people proud. And it can be demotivating if you read nonsensical statements. But I would say hype can be, getting back to the question, hype can be a dangerous thing because you can set expectations above and beyond what's even attainable. Not what the, if we did a 10 out of, I saw this video last month, or I think it was a month or two ago, by, it looked like Rob Stark, honestly, but I don't think it was him. But the video was basically like, this game can be a 10 out of 10, but if you overhype it for yourself, it's going to feel like a 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. So I would say, like, identify the concepts in a project that excite you, that you want to see innovated in the industry, and take that excitement you have and vocalize it through messaging, forum boards, Reddits, Discord, be part of the streams and follow that. And if you're not a person who has the patience to follow game development, because a lot of us don't, right? When I was a player, I didn't. So a lot of us don't have that patience. If that patience doesn't exist for you, sit back, look at other things, go play other games, and come back when the game's ready. Like that's my thoughts on that.
That's a very good,
You can
very good perspective.
Like on the subreddit, from time to time, like responding to player feedback, I think it's very admirable that you open up this development process for people to like not only just look at it, but also like give feedback into.
Oh yeah.
Because like the development is very iterative, it's very slow, and I think as like gamers want, they want things now and they want it fast.
Give it now.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that. I'm going to go to the next question because we're only 30 minutes in, and otherwise people are going to go from my head. Malicious03 asks, can you share or tell us anything new about the development of the orc races, particularly the Vec? Dying to know what they'll look like in game.
We've definitely released some concept art with the orc races. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things that's key about these races is that, as we go through development and we answer questions with regards to kind of like our pipeline of development, and we discover things from our alpha, from the data we collect. We want to make sure we don't jump ahead ourselves in getting these races developed if we have to go back and change something that we discovered during alpha, right? So right now we're presenting both of the human races, we're presenting one of the elven races, we're presenting one of the dwarven races. The orc races you're probably not going to see until later in the year. Once you do see them though, we will have begun pretty aggressively production on all of the races at that phase. So I would say look for near the end of the year, what those orc races are going to look like. And then, I think one of the cool things about, the orcs is that there's a strong disparity between the two visuals. You have these like traditional big buffy orc that are the Renkai, and then you also, you have these kind of more goblinesque looking Vec that really there's a strong change in the animation stance of the character models, in addition to the changes between the character model meshes, right? So they're going to be very different between the two of them, and I think that's going to be a cool component that we don't traditionally see in other MMORPGs.
I noticed that, like, from the races in Ashes of Creation, they're all like relatively humanoid. Was that from a like ease of development standpoint? That you
It's
guys
more
were
from
able to do that?
it's really more from a lore. I mean, obviously, yes, there is a component there, that you want to be able to. So one of the things that's interesting, but I loved Lineage 2. I was a huge Lineage 2 player, and I did like how they kind of did their equipment and itemization, and all races can wear all armors, and they're going to have a different visual appearance on the race that dons the armor. Even if it's the same type of armor, it's going to share the thematic components, it'll share the color palette, but it's going to have an orc is going to don orc looking armor. Even if it's the same type of armor that a human might wear, they're going to look different between the two. So to answer that question, really it was primarily lore driven, but there's obviously some saves that you make on the character and animation side when you get to share pieces across multiple races. Yes.
Absolutely. Like
I'm gonna be a dwarf. So
At the end of the day, it is still developed like an indie project. I would say, like a
Yeah.
AAA indie project, but an indie project, and the more you can
Yeah,
save
absolutely. I mean,
on aspects like that, the more you can
even
like invest in other.
right, and now to be clear, and for those of you again who haven't researched the itemization principles of ashes, like you will be able to mix and match pieces, right? There's an 8-piece armor set, and you can mix and match across different types of armor sets or whatever. There'll be set bonuses though, so you want to try to be cognizant of that as you acquire items. But yeah, no, to what you're saying, even any MMO that's going to be effective in creating as diverse a game as we're aiming to create, and as ours is, MMOs in and of themselves are difficult projects. Ours is a particularly ambitious one, so we do have to find ways that we can effectively create this world that doesn't kill us in the process or just is unattainable, so to speak. So yes, we're an independent developer, meaning we don't have a publisher, we aren't a traditional AAA studio, but we have a budget that's relatively close to what a AAA MMORPG would come to expect, and we're using a very powerful engine. Unreal Engine is a beautiful engine from a graphical fidelity standpoint, and I think people can see in the quality of the videos we've been releasing over the last couple of months, like our aim is to be a very AAA product. And I think that we will attain that with relative ease because all of our developers have a background from AAA companies as well. So that's helpful. But yeah, no, it's a big project. MMOs are big projects. You got to find the gains where you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And like development is always scope management, right? Question 10 is from Nibbles Cookies.
nibbles cookies.
These names.
What is it? Middles cookies?
Nibbles, like
Oh, Nibbles cookies. Okay.
How will you stop big mafia guilds from owning all the good dungeons and world bosses by camping them?
It's a
That
very good
is the
question.
bane of every probably open world
Yes.
MMORPG. So, our split between open world and instancing is 80-20, right? 80% open world, 20% instancing. However, our world is very large. So I would say it's going to be quite a difficult task for any type of quote unquote big mafia guild to overtake all of those good dungeons and world bosses by camping them. We do some traditional things with regards to having variant time windows on the world bosses. We have dungeons that open up based on like node progression, so those can change every now and then. We have kind of guild size limitations, but honestly, the real answer to that is going to be what traditionally happens is in a non-faction based game where politics drive player interaction, we have many pseudo factions, many kind of fake factions that we drive players
Jesus
through,
Christ.
gently nudging them to be part of communities. And those communities exist from a social organization standpoint, whether it be like Thieves Guild and Scholars Academies. You're going to share chats with people who are part of those. We have religion systems. You're going to choose a religion and have shared chat with those. You're going to have a citizenship and share affiliation with the node that you're a part of. You're going to have guild structures. You're going to have families. So there's many pseudo factions that exist, even though we're a non-faction based game, and you have the kind of ease to determine, oh, do I want to be a part of this or do I want to be part of something else? And I think anytime you have a mafia guild, at least the MMOs I've played, typically servers with a mafia guild devolve into a 2-faction based thing, right? You have the mafia and you have everyone else, so to speak. And that can change with the winds of politics, with the winds of player intrigue, right? Over time, you have betrayals in the mafia guild and they splinter off into 2 groups and join the other side, or it's like weird things that can occur in that regard. So I think that that's the important way that will solve itself. I don't think the developer necessarily has to step in there and say, no, let's railroad this politics or let's handhold this aspect. I think that anytime you have a bully, you're going to have a counter bully, and that's something that we try to encourage as part of the politics process.
I think like
Fair.
every game that has such systems, you don't want to put a brake on the amount of fun you're allowed to have. Oh, I see my camera froze.
Oh, did you freeze?
My camera apparently did.
Oh no, I see it as well.
Of course, yeah, it's in the best possible. It might come back in a second.
Oh no. That's funny.
Okay, actually, oh,
Oh, wait.
That-
All right.
nope.
We've got many colors.
Okay then.
Oh, there you're back.
Welcome to the
gotcha.
backup. Welcome to the backup camera.
Oh, you had a backup camera. That is actually. That's good.
Pretty smart.
I don't have a backup camera. I have my phone. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was using a DSLR as a previous camera because it looks better, and
Oh,
this one
nice.
kind of wants to be wonky sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, as I was saying, you have like EVE Online where you have like these big
Corporations. Yeah.
corporations, and like you have drama happening, you have like backstabbing, and you have like infiltrators that go in, like disband these massive like groups of people. That comes with its own drama, but it's nonetheless, if you play that game or not, reading those stories is one of the most fun things I can imagine, actually.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as long as the world is okay, so one of the things that I think will naturally combat the risk that comes with one megacorp or one mega guild kind of owning the server, so to speak, and killing off competition, is that Ashes is constantly changing, right? So the way that nodes spawn and despawn and can be destroyed, and the castles exist to exert pressure, and these world events, they pop up. Like
I mean, it's honestly, it's a good question,
and it's
though.
constantly changing. Those two things naturally combat the opportunity for mega guilds to claw control over a particular server, because the more
Because then it's like
opportunity there
you
is
get
for
stuck
divergence,
being only in that guild or just
areas
not getting to
that,
do content.
are changing from a development standpoint because players develop the world. The more difficult it is to wrangle control over those things, right? And the higher the difficulty, the less likely a guild is going to have both the numbers and the organizational skill to accomplish what they want in that regard. I mean, can it happen? Yeah, anything I guess could happen in that regard, but it's going to be much more difficult than it would be, I think, in other MMOs.
And at the end of the day, like any MMO is an evolving game, so it's not that it's a perfectly static system that will never change again. I am a little bit lost. Okay, yeah. So then the next question is from VManGman21. What is your opinion on expansions, making all previous content obsolete and effectively reducing the amount of meaningful content as opposed to expanding it?
Yeah, I definitely seen that in other MMOs I played. One of the key aspects of Ashes that I think combats this concern is all of the systems in some way, shape, or form are integrated with each other, and they all use as a conduit to be exposed from a content perspective in the game world, the node system, right? So as we think of expansions and how we're going to introduce additional content, essentially, we're thinking of how we can introduce that content through the node system. So whether that be a new area of the map or that be new points of interest, all of those are going to relate in some way, shape, or form to the nodes. And players as citizens utilize these nodes for many of the services that you would need across the spectrum of systems that we incorporate into the game. So since that's our primary objective on how to introduce new content, I think that's going to keep relevant the existing previous content that players are still going to need to interact with, whether it be from an artisanship standpoint and their gathering, processing, and crafting, whether that be through their adventuring class, whether that be through treasure finding or social organizations. All of those things are still going to remain relevant alongside the new content that gets introduced. The other thing that I would say that's interesting is that, traditionally I found in MMORPGs that one of the biggest things MMOs suffer from is new player acquisition. MMOs tend to do very well at launch from a momentum perspective, and they can, if they're a good game, they retain the players and they're good at retention. But when it comes to acquiring new players, what typically happens is as players enter into an MMO world, they're entering into these barren starting areas, right? And there's nobody present there because the game population on a particular server has moved on to other areas. The way that I've designed the node system to try to combat that is that traditionally you will find on a new server that the nodes closest to the starting areas will tend to develop first and fastest, because that's where the gaming population heat source is, right? Players get into the world, they're entering in from these starting locations. As those nodes advance, until they get sieged and destroyed and pave the way for new content, they will lock out nearby nodes from advancing beyond them, and they'll put them into this kind of parent-vassal state. That brings players back to those nodes because they're citizens there, they have housing there, they have content that arcs out into the points of interest in the world. And so, 4 months into a server, you may have a metropolis that's spawned near the starting area, and it's a big hub of traffic, so that as new players enter into the world, they're entering into this massive hub of player activity.
That's very cool.
And the biggest selling point of MMOs, in my opinion, is the social aspect. And so what other MMOs have experienced when you enter into these empty areas is people are like, okay, I'm doing this old content, I'm trying to level up, and I have nobody around me, I have no guilds I can talk to, I have no friends I can, meet up with. I'm just out here in this barren wasteland of a starting zone. And that is a real problem because you lose out on that social component. But having the node system in place and keeping that as a major funnel of activity gets to introduce those new players. Then we have systems that kind of complement that. We're going to have quest components and mentorship programs that kind of incentivize players to interact with those new players, get them involved into those organizations that are
That'd be very cool.
part of the node system, and
Kind of like a mentor system.
The social climate of the server they're part of.
I can definitely see that. It's always a shame that when you get to
I think it's fun to help low-level characters if you're a high-level guy.
Content and content people have loved before, but
They can somehow create some sort of a system where you have an incentive to do that outside of just wanting to do it.
Some other games, there's so much content.
That'd be cool.
That people are so all the content is technically relevant, but not in a great way.
Well, I think the other thing about that is, I think it also comes down to the general just game philosophy, right? Risk versus reward, and spending time to get somewhere. That content will be relevant in a few ways. Obviously, it's going to be relevant because even as a low-level player going through that content, you're contributing to node progression. You're contributing to the world's development. You're acquiring resources and materials that work in a very foundational way with how the artisanship system is developed, right? You're able to deconstruct items that you get and get unique components from the deconstruction, so you can play a part in the economy. You can join and participate in community-focused quest lines that are relevant from a religion and from a social organization standpoint and from a node organization standpoint. So you become a citizen early, you become part of those organizations. They're going to give you activities that are up to date with the current political climate of the world, right? Because they relate to neighboring nodes activities. So even if you're a low-level player or a brand new player and you're doing this kind of content, you're still going to have access, even at a low level, to participate in certain quest lines that effectuate change in the world and can also inhibit or aid a neighboring node's development. So, there's still avenues in which players who are new, even if the core population of a server has moved on to a later level, or they're still going to have relevance as part of that process as well. I hear what you're saying though. Players who join a game, if the player population has moved on to level 60 or level 70 or whatever, right? Some arbitrary level number, and you're a level 5 player, you don't want to have to go. Nobody wants to have to go through the process of leveling to that level. But as part of our ideals as a game, we're not going to give boosts away. We're not going to auto level up a character. You have to spend time acclimating yourself to what this game is, to what the world that you're part of is. And that's an investment, a time investment, and that plays towards our ideas of risk versus reward. And I've always said, our game's not going to be for everybody. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be. There's a large enough population of gamers out there who are interested in this type of game where players have to invest time or have to invest, smart gameplay in order to achieve a particular reward.
The relevant that you can contribute and influence.
Well, they're not trying to make it for everyone. That's just not doable.
Lightward asks a similar question to question 10. How can you ensure that open world PvP will not eventually make the game unplayable for small guilds and individuals?
We have a very good deterrent into open world PvP from a PK standpoint, right? So I define open world PvP through our flagging system. And you have a non-combatant state, you have a combatant state, you have a corrupt state. The combatant state is when two combatants they're fighting each other, right? They're flagging against each other. They become purple, right? And at the end of that fight, you don't get any corruption if you kill a purple player. But if you kill a person who's not participating in combat, who is just standing there, you PK them, player kill them, you're going to gain corruption. Corruption is a very, very negative, bad thing to have. You can lose your completed gear. You take like 4 times the normal death penalty. You accrue debt XP at a much faster rate.
Okay, this is interesting.
Decline in your PvP efficacy, right? So your skills start getting modifiers that decrease their effectiveness. That's just gonna just to be frank, and this will have to be tested. People will experience this through the testing, and I'm open to making sure that my goal with the flagging system, which is to deter outright PKing on a frequent basis, will work. We can amend some of these things, but the idea is that, like, if it's a moment of passion, if it's like a moment of pure opportunity and you're willing to take the risk, you can PK another player. But it's not going to be something that can be done repeatedly and by a large group of players. There's a bounty hunter system. That's a
I want to be a bounty hunter.
Bounty hunters
I'm not even PvP, but bounty hunting sounds interesting.
Players of corrupt players go out.
I'm gonna hunt down
So it's like this is going to
UPKers and PK you.
We have a lot of
I can get behind that. Not a PvPer, by the way. Not a PvPer. And I can get behind that. I like that. I do. I'm gonna be a bounty hunter. I'm gonna be a Mandalorian.
And I think that's a good way to go, because again, those systems all have risk versus reward as well, and there's a major benefit for people to want to participate.
And what if I'm someone getting PK'd, and what if I want to go and pay for a bounty hunter to take somebody out? That would be sick.
But if you don't, that's not your thing, that's fine. But there needs to be an element of risk that exists in the open world. And the reason for that is because from an economic standpoint, there are core pieces of our economy that relate to the traversal of goods across regions. And this is how you build up and you make those legendary items, and you move those goods across, and you are able to establish this crafting empire that's significant, but it needs to have an element of risk to it. And that's a component of the game that's very important.
The next one might be the longest question we have, from Tiberius 2068. We've heard a lot about the PvP side of the game, and we know that 80% of the world is supposed to be contestable. So what will Ashes of Creation be able to offer PvE-focused players that does not involve PvP? As a PvE-focused player myself, I enjoyed WoW raids and dungeons. I'm curious to see if Ashes of Creation will have something to offer players like me. PvP and guild politics are quite boring after a while. That was a mouthful.
That's good. Again, I would reiterate here, those of you guys who haven't had an opportunity to research a lot about Ashes of Creation, definitely check out the Ashes of Creation wiki, research this stuff. We have a lot of plans in place for compelling dungeons and for fun raid events, for heavy emphasis on crafting and resource gathering. We have expressed probably this more amount about those systems than we have about the PvP side of the game. When it comes to the open world and that kind of 80% world being supposed to be contestable, it's not that 80% of the world is supposed to be contestable. It's that, in my experience in MMOs, they have gone heavily down this kind of single player experience, this curated, very enclosed instanced type of experiences, and that removes the element of playing within a massive world with massive multiplayer components, right? Like, I want to run through a dungeon and meet somebody along the way in a group that I never met before. I like, chat with them. Hey, what's going on? How you guys doing? Like, your party went down. Let me move my room over and come and res your party and form that friendship. And like, now we've done something together, as opposed to just like, all right, I got my core group, I got my constant party. We're just going to go run our cycle of instance dungeons and never meet anybody outside of our party. Like, that to me is boring. The emphasis in Ashes of Creation is this very high level of social interaction, this encouragement to meet other players, to play with other people. Imagine that in an MMO, to do those things. Like, it's almost like that doesn't exist anymore or something. I don't know. But like, the open world aspect is not so that it's meant to be contested everywhere. Yes, that is a component, that is a risk, that is how passions flare and emotions fly. Like, yes, that can happen. But what's going to probably happen more often is you're going to meet people you never knew before, who might live halfway across the world, right? And that's the thing that always excited me about MMORPGs. Like, when I when I started playing MMOs, I was 7 years old, right? It was 1992. I was playing Neverwinter's Nights on AOL when it was $6 by the hour to play an MMO. And and it was a fun
$6 an
experience because
hour.
I
Dear
met
God.
people at that age. Maybe I shouldn't have met those people. I don't know. But like, I met people who were halfway across. Yeah, stranger danger. I'm in danger. No, like maybe that is something that got lost on this new generation. So just something to think about. The idea behind the open world isn't to create contestable areas. It's to put you in an environment with other people, with a massive amount of other people, because that's what makes MMOs MMOs.
Oh yeah, like, absolutely. I think it's these like stories you make for yourself in this world that eventually make up part of the fun. Um, I think this is going to be then the last question from Breakfast Libertarian. Each metropolis node has a superpower. For instance, scientific nodes allow teleportation between parent nodes and any of its vassal nodes for its citizens. Can you tell us any of the other node type superpowers?
Hmm. The the only problem with that is that the superpowers might change for the other nodes. Like, if I say it here, I'm gonna be held to that, so to speak. No, what I will say is some of the other things that we've been thinking about, is with, let's say, the divine node, for example. We've thought about incorporating a structure of catacomb-based dungeons that are like ultra difficult, almost Iron Man mode type, that come with the super. That's essentially the superpower of the divine node. Just to kind of give a little tidbit there, that might change, so don't hold me to it. But the idea is that if you're able to build up the superpower, the metropolis of a divine node, it unlocks a mega catacomb kind of dungeon under it, and then that dungeon would connect to other divine nodes that are in its vassal. And those divine nodes might have unique bosses, unique drop, reward tables, and it's something that is going to essentially kind of change and be procedurally built as well, so it can be different across the different divine nodes.
Well, it all sounds very interesting. We have about 1 minute left. I'm gonna quickly squeeze in the last question
Nice.
because I do think it's a good one. You said before, Minecrafter 338 asks, you said before that Ashes of Creation is not for everyone. Can you please describe what we cannot expect from the game?
I think you can safely not expect that this is going to be a trophy for everybody game. I think that is there's plenty out there on the market who rewards. You logged in, congratulations. Here's your trophy. Oh, you walked a few steps and you made it to the next point. Wow, look at you. Like that. I don't think that's going to be the mentality of the game.
I don't think anyone has ever been interested in a
Good.
congratulations.
Like when people were asking for daily login rewards, I was just immediately like, I was immediately like, yikes. No. And then when we saw in the next developer update that we watched, my research series, that they said, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, oh, thank God, right? Black Desert Online.
I'm not even going to name the game. I'm not going to name the game. But I played a game that was a new MMO, and all you had to do was click a button on the right hand of your screen, and it would run your character, auto-path you from quest to quest. And
I know which one you're talking about.
Black Desert Online. He won't say it, I will.
What? All right, I'm going to go get a drink. I'll be back in a little bit. Let me know when my quest is finished. It's like, come on. You know, I think that at the end of the day, there's an entire generation of gamers who have never experienced what it's like to play a difficult MMO and to feel that sense of accomplishment for work done, to have something that is introducing you to, you know, a large number of players from a persistent world perspective, get you integrated into a guild. Like, there's a whole generation of Fortnite players and Minecraft players out there who, especially on the Minecraft front, they've like touched the surface of what an MMO can be, but they've never felt the MMOs that many of us as MMO communities have felt, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and our nostalgia of that first love experience. So like, I'm not saying necessarily like, well, let me just say this, that our aim is to kind of bring back that feeling we had, and it's a difficult thing to do, but that's our aim. You know, we want to get back to what made MMOs a great experience, and yeah, I think I spoke on that enough.
Well, I think that's it for our time for today. I want to thank you again and your team for participating with us in this AMA, and I want to also thank like my own moderators for, you know, keeping an eye on the thread. So yeah. Thanks,
yeah, absolutely. I loved it. By the way, big thanks to the MMORPG subreddit, that community, for coming and showing out. The number of responses and questions that you guys had was overwhelming. And Marnik, Protobear, really appreciate you, you know, representing that community. That obviously you guys have done a great job over there in cultivating, I think, a large salt mine, and
they have been on their best behavior.
I know.
For this one, and it honest to God surprises me.
No, I love it. It's always fun.
Oh yeah.
But thanks for coming out and participating in this. I think it was a great event.
Yeah, again, anytime.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you to the audience. Thank you to the Ashes of Creation community. Thank you to the MMORPG subreddit community. We've enjoyed you guys coming and participating. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We love you all. We love the MMORPG genre, and we are going to do our best to bring
Thank you, Steven.
Proud of. So we will see you guys in the future. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Okay. That was great. We got some answers to some questions that we hadn't heard before. We got some answers to some things that we'd heard a little bit about. We got to hear some good comments, you know, and I'm sure there's a lot more questions than that, but, you know, Steven's time is valuable, so they're going to set aside a certain amount of time. But, you know, we get to hear questions from them every single month. Of course, the first developer update I attend, which was last month, they barely got to anything, you know, so that was kind of unfortunate. But you know, the next one is next week on the Friday. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend. I'm pretty sure it's the next Friday. Let's see, it's the 4th Friday. Yeah, it's gonna be the 25th. It's my wife's birthday too, but I'm not going to be able to attend that one, so I will have to check it out the following week. I'll probably do it the following Monday, I suspect. So I'll have to cover it then, but next week I'll definitely be covering this video regarding Asmongold's interview with Steven. That was last year. It's a long video. So, like I said, I need to set aside a couple hours So I'll be doing that next week, probably on Monday, I suspect, during the day. So we'll see. Hopefully, if all goes to plan, I'll be able to do that. Otherwise, before I end off today, I just want to do a quick shout out actually to a recent Twitch team that I was invited to, and I accepted after doing a little bit of research. They're called Charity Supporters, and they're all about just doing streams to support charity. So check them out. Right? Otherwise, that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for your valuable time. I hope you're well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.